Greetings, my dear viewer. This is a channel about marital infidelity and about the consequences if one spouse starts to cheat on the other. If you, as well as I do, support true family values and condemn cheating, then subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Let's get started. There's something intrinsic to my nature that likely explains it. Perhaps it's the guilt instilled in me as a child by my parents, a tool they used to keep me on the right path. Or maybe it's simply how I'm built. Whatever the cause, even as a child, I'd occasionally wake in the dead of night, haunted by vivid dreams where I was guilty of some terrible act. The worst part wasn't the crime itself. It was the looming inevitability of being found out. In these dreams, the weight of guilt pressed heavily on me, coupled with an unshakable certainty that proof of my misdeed existed and that I would be exposed. The nightmares would jolt me awake, my heart pounding furiously as I sat upright in bed, struggling to find peace again. Oddly enough, those dreams stopped entirely when I met my wife. She was everything I didn't know I needed, warm, loving, and full of laughter. She had a way of giggling at even my weakest jokes and won my mother over effortlessly the first time they met. We were married for 12 years. The first few years were good, great even. But after the birth of our first child, a daughter, things started to shift. The change was gradual at first, so faint I barely noticed. Yet, as time passed, it became impossible to ignore. When our son was born 2 years later, her transformation seemed complete. With each year that followed, the distance between us grew. Bitterness took root, and her once gentle nature hardened into something sharp and cold. She began lashing out, her tone harsh and cutting, even with the children. Motherhood, it seemed, was not a role she fully embraced. I tried to talk to her, to understand and fix what had gone wrong, but every attempt ended the same way. Arguments. Arguments she often sparked out of thin air. Eventually, I stopped trying. The divide between us became an unspoken truth, and we fell into separate parallel lives. If someone were to ask me what I had done to warrant such treatment, I wouldn't have an answer. It wasn't anything I had done. She simply seemed perpetually dissatisfied. With me, with the children, with her life. As the kids grew older, her desire to escape the house became more pronounced. Her outings became frequent and routine. Most evenings, I would come home from work just as she was heading out the door. "Dinner's on you tonight," she'd say casually. "I'm going out." At first, her words cut deeply, but over time, I began to see them as a reprieve. The nights she was away brought a calm to the house, a quiet that felt like peace. Oddly enough, it was the nights she stayed home that I started to dread. I took over the household duties, cooking, grocery shopping, and meal planning. I became the one who managed the day-to-day needs of the home. Naturally, my children began to gravitate toward me. Over time, I became both their father and, in many ways, their mother. While this brought us closer, it left me with a deep bitterness. A father isn't meant to be both parents. He should be the one greeted with joy at the door, knowing his children are thriving under the warmth and care of their mother. But in our home, things were different. When I walked through the door, the kids would come out of their rooms, eager to spend time with me, but they avoided their mother entirely. The woman I once knew, the one I had fallen in love with, was unrecognizable. Her own upbringing was a warning she had ignored. Her mother had been unfaithful, making infidelity almost a way of life. My wife had witnessed the devastation it caused her father, how he had endured a hollow marriage for the sake of his children, suffering in silence until they left for college. Only then did he leave. My wife had vowed she would never repeat her mother's mistakes, but even that promise, it seemed, was one she had broken. The beginning of the end came on an ordinary night. The children were asleep when she walked into the living room and uttered the words no husband wants to hear. "Michael, we need to talk." Her voice was cold, almost clinical, and she didn't soften the blow. Without hesitation, she told me she had a lover and would be spending her nights with him. The revelation wasn't a surprise. I'd suspected as much for a while. Strangely, I felt no pain or betrayal, only relief. Her absence, like her outings, would make life easier for everyone. At first, she seemed triumphant, almost smug at my lack of reaction, but as she turned to leave, I thought I caught a flicker of disappointment in her expression. Did she want to hurt me? Was she hoping I'd beg her to stay? If so, she misunderstood. To me, the woman I had married no longer existed. I stayed for the sake of the children, just as her father had. That became my sole focus. In the months that followed, we settled into a strange, detached rhythm. My wife's absences went unnoticed by the children, who never even asked where she was. It was as if they, too, felt the relief of her departure. Spring arrived, and with it, the usual chores of the season. One Saturday, the kids and I spent the day cleaning every inch of the house, dusting, polishing, and airing it out. Without her presence, the house felt lighter. That evening, we celebrated our efforts with burgers and root beer floats. The weeks that followed were busy. I tackled home improvement projects, repainting, fixing shutters, and repairing parts of the house that had been neglected. My children helped where they could, and together, we turned the house into a home for the three of us. Some tasks, however, were beyond me. Every spring, I hired professionals to handle the septic tank, a dirty but necessary job. One Friday evening, with the kids staying at their grandparents' house, I returned home with takeout, expecting solitude. Instead, I found my wife sitting in the living room with her latest lover. They were drinking my best scotch, laughing as though they owned the place. She announced that her new partner would be staying the weekend, sleeping in our bed. With a smirk, she suggested I could watch if I wanted, laughing at her own cruel joke. Her lover, emboldened by her audacity, took my dinner and slapped me as he walked past to head upstairs. That slap shattered something inside me. As their mocking laughter echoed through the house, I began to prepare. The garage held everything I needed: plastic sheets, old rags, and tools. Quietly, methodically, I planned my next move. That night, as they reveled in their cruelty, I reached the breaking point. I tore through the soil, exposing the septic tank below. The clock had already ticked well past midnight when round 3 commenced. Their obnoxiously exaggerated moans masked the sounds of my movements perfectly. Grasping the bat that leaned by the doorway, I tested a few overhead swings, ensuring I wouldn't strike the ceiling by mistake. Satisfied with the motion, I ascended the stairs and proceeded down the hallway toward her bedroom. Without hesitation, I brought the bat crashing down on his head, the force propelling it into hers with a sickening collision. He collapsed immediately, his body going limp. The sounds she made shifted from indulgence to terror. A second swing ended her screams abruptly. By sheer fortune, their skulls remained intact. Neither shattered under the blows. They simply lay unconscious. Wasting no time, I restrained their wrists and ankles with zip ties, ensuring they couldn't resist. Not that they stirred during the process. Their oblivion was complete. There was no undoing this now. One by one, I carried them outside. He went first. Hoisting him over the gaping tank, I ended his existence before releasing his lifeless body into the dark abyss. The sound that followed was a muffled thud rather than a splash. Next came her turn. For a fleeting moment, memories of our life together invaded my thoughts. Our courtship, the romantic dates, the proposal, and those vows exchanged before family and God. But the past didn't matter now. I did what was necessary, consigning her to the same grim fate as him. To eliminate any evidence, I discarded the knife into the tank as well, unwilling to gamble on cleaning it to perfection. After sealing the lid, I covered it with soil and meticulously replaced the grass so that no trace of the disturbance remained. Unsure whether my shirt carried any telltale stains, I tossed it into the backyard fire pit and watched it burn to ash. I washed myself thoroughly, scrubbing my skin raw and changing into fresh clothes. Once cleaned up, I armed myself with a flashlight and methodically examined every inch of the bedroom, hallway, and stairs for any stray evidence. Weeks later, the thought of the shovel I'd used, its role in the grim task, would surface unexpectedly. It's always the small details you overlook. Sure enough, I found blood on its wooden handle. I burned that part to ash and sterilized the steel blade with bleach before discarding it at the local dump. As dawn approached, one final task remained. Taking his car keys, I drove his vehicle to a rough neighborhood on the other side of town. Parking it inconspicuously, I began the long trek home. Along the way, I dropped the keys into separate sewer drains, scattering them one by one, starting about a mile from where the car was abandoned. The night was quiet and dark, and I blended into the shadows, just another figure lost in the void of the city streets. When the sun rose, I double-checked the house. I couldn't believe my luck. If their skulls had fractured, cleaning would have been nearly impossible. Thankfully, the plastic sheeting I had prepared wasn't needed. That Sunday evening, my parents returned with the kids just in time for dinner. I made cheeseburgers and root beer floats, a simple, comforting meal for all 5 of us. My mother, noticing my cheerful demeanor, remarked on it. I casually replied, "It was a relaxing weekend. Now my sweethearts are home." When she asked about my wife's whereabouts, I shrugged. "No clue," I said, "and honestly, I don't care." That seemed to satisfy her curiosity. On Monday, I took a sick day and began systematically disposing of her belongings. I delivered her clothes to several Goodwill drop-offs scattered across nearby towns. Her makeup found its way to the public landfill, buried within a bag of household trash. Her jewelry, though harder to part with, also had to go. It was too risky to keep. Most of it had lost its sentimental value anyway, reminders of gifts she never deserved and her countless betrayals. I figured it would take a day or two before her employer realized she was missing. When they finally called, I claimed ignorance, feigning concern. Then I filed a missing persons report, crafting a believable story about her repeated infidelities. I told the officers I assumed she had run off with her latest lover. When asked why I hadn't reported her absence sooner, I delivered a carefully rehearsed explanation. I didn't worry, because I was used to her disappearing acts. I only became concerned after her employer contacted me. When they inquired about her lover's identity, I feigned disgust. "Do you really think I'd want to know?" I replied, channeling just the right amount of disdain. I painted myself as a patient father who had made peace with her double life long ago, focusing instead on raising my children. I even claimed I'd planned to divorce her once they were older. The detectives seemed satisfied with my account. A couple of weeks later, they informed me their theory was that she had eloped with her lover. "Good riddance," I muttered with a shrug. As they walked out, I added with a smirk, "If you find her, give me a heads up." They laughed and never came back. That was 5 years ago. Since then, life has been nothing short of perfect. After a year, I filed for divorce on the grounds of abandonment. The kids occasionally brought up their mother, but quickly adjusted to her absence without much emotional turmoil. Not a single tear was shed. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a pang of anxiety every time the septic tank gets emptied. Still, the knowledge that their remains continue to decompose in the depths brings me a peculiar sense of closure. I'm especially grateful they were unclothed when I disposed of them. No risk of fabric clogging the pump. Explaining that scenario would have been complicated. Unless, of course, the driver shared my marital history. And now, if you'll excuse me, I have to use the bathroom. Never has the simplicity of flushing felt so satisfying. Each flush reminds me of my gift, traveling through the pipes to rest eternally alongside my unfaithful wife and her final mistake. My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you. Greetings, my dear viewer. This is a channel about marital infidelity and about the consequences if one spouse starts to cheat on the other. If you, as well as I do, support true family values and condemn cheating, then subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Let's get started. I glanced down at the empty spot on my finger where my engagement ring should have been and let out a frustrated groan. This can't be happening, I muttered to myself, already dreading what lay ahead. A wave of self-pity washed over me as I imagined my future. Years of solitude, surrounded by a sea of cats and takeout containers. I shouted into the silent room, a faint trace of humor in my tone despite the bitterness in my thoughts. Is this what you had in mind for me, Adam? The words echoed, unanswered, as I fast-forwarded through my week to the one highlight I could cling to, girls' night at Anna's place. Anna's living room was the picture of comfort and warmth, with wine glasses clinking, soft music playing, and the oversized sectional serving as a cozy perch for everyone. I settled into my favorite corner with a second glass of Merlot in hand. Inevitably, the conversation drifted from the usual work gossip to the ever-present topic of relationships. "So, how are things with Adam?" Rachel asked, tucking her feet beneath her as her curious gaze landed on me. "Any plans for the big day yet?" I swirled the wine in my glass, watching the light dance across its surface. "Oh, it's fine. He's dependable," I said, the word sounding flat even to me. Anna raised an eyebrow, her expression hovering somewhere between skepticism and sympathy. "Dependable?" she repeated, her voice laced with doubt. That's not exactly the most thrilling endorsement. Leaning forward conspiratorially, I lowered my voice as though confessing a secret. "Let's just say he's not exactly—" "Stephen," I said with a mischievous grin. Anna's eyes sparkled with interest. "Stephen? You mean the personal trainer? Oh, don't remind me of that guy. He was wild." I couldn't help but laugh as the memories resurfaced. "Do you remember the time we got caught sneaking around the gym after hours?" I asked, my voice brimming with nostalgia. The room erupted into laughter as I shook my head. But Adam? The boldest thing he's ever suggested is keeping the lights on. The group dissolved into giggles, the wine fueling our humor. Emboldened by their reactions, I added, "And let's not even talk about the equipment comparison." I rolled my eyes dramatically, prompting another wave of laughter. Stephen's gym shorts left little to the imagination. Adam, well, let's just say he's operating with a more compact model. Rachel topped off her glass, still intrigued. "So why did you say yes when he proposed?" she asked. I shrugged, holding out my glass for a refill. "He's a good guy," I replied. "Steady job, owns his home, actually wants to settle down. And let's face it, I'm not getting any younger." I took a sip, hoping the wine would steady my faltering voice. Stephen was exciting, sure, but husband material? Not exactly. Sometimes you have to make practical choices. Anna's gaze cut through me. "So you settled," she said bluntly. "I wouldn't call it settling," I shot back, though my words lacked conviction. "Okay, maybe a little," I admitted, laughing to brush it off. "But isn't that what adulthood is about? Trading thrills for stability?" The conversation shifted to Rachel's latest Tinder debacle, but my mind lingered on my own words. I wasn't unhappy with Adam. He was kind, reliable, and loved me. Sure, our relationship lacked the spark I once craved, but wasn't compromise part of life? Everyone gave up something. A sudden creak in the doorway pulled me from my thoughts. I turned and froze. Adam stood there, his face a mix of shock and pain. My heart sank as I realized he must have overheard everything. He'd mentioned earlier that he might swing by to grab his laptop charger, but I hadn't expected him to walk in now, or to hear that. His eyes locked onto mine and the room fell silent. My stomach churned as he stepped back into the night, leaving behind the charger and my words hanging heavily in the air. Outside, Adam stood still, the weight of her words crushing him like a collapsing roof. Each sentence replayed in his mind, each one striking a fresh blow. She'd compared him to her ex, mocked their intimacy, and admitted to her friends that she'd settled for him. He felt the ground beneath him shift and without a word he turned and walked away, leaving everything, even the laptop charger, behind. His feet led him to the dim glow of a familiar sports bar down the street. The neon sign buzzed faintly as he pushed through the door and sank onto a stool. Buzz, the bartender, greeted him with a nod. "The usual?" Buzz asked. "Make it a double," Adam replied, his voice hollow. He stared into his glass, his thoughts circling like vultures. The sting of betrayal cut deep. Elena hadn't just shared private details. She'd laid bare her doubts about their entire relationship. And beneath that pain, a question gnawed at him. If he was her safe choice, was she the right choice for him? He took a slow sip, the whiskey's burn a poor distraction from the ache in his chest. "You know what really gets me?" he said aloud, more to himself than to Buzz. "It's not just what she said. It's what it means. She basically admitted she's still looking for something better." Buzz leaned in, his expression serious. "That's rough, man. The question is, what's your move?" Adam's jaw tightened. That was the question, wasn't it? Elena's words had shattered his view of their relationship. Could he keep going, knowing he was her fallback plan? Could he accept being good enough, but never truly enough? His phone buzzed on the bar. Elena's name lit up the screen, accompanied by a message. "Where are you? I'm worried. Please call me." He stared at the screen, his emotions tangled. Was she genuinely worried about him? Or was she afraid of losing her safety net? "You know what really stings, Buzz?" Adam muttered, setting his glass down. Buzz paused, listening intently. "I thought we were on the same page. I thought we wanted the same things." Adam's voice cracked as he continued. "It's not just the jokes or the comparisons. It's the fact that she's left the door open for something better." Buzz nodded, his face lined with years of hard-earned wisdom. "I've seen this play out more times than I can count," he said. "When someone settles, it usually ends one of two ways. Either they leave when something better comes along, or they stay and make both people miserable." Adam nodded slowly, clarity settling over him like the whiskey's warmth. This wasn't just about insecurity or overreacting. It was about facing hard truths. Elena had laid bare her doubts, and that revelation changed everything. He finished his drink and stood, a newfound resolve in his posture. Whatever came next, he couldn't ignore what he'd heard. This wasn't just about her settling. It was about whether he'd settle for being second best. This wasn't something I could sweep under the rug or pretend hadn't occurred. A discussion was inevitable, and I had to prepare myself for her attempts to dismiss it as harmless chatter among friends. But brushing it off wasn't going to work anymore. "Thanks, Buzz," I said, leaving more than enough cash to cover my drink and a generous tip. As I turned toward the exit, I steeled myself for what lay ahead, already weighed down by the confrontation looming before me. My chest tightened, my thoughts spiraling, but I forced an outward calm as I walked. "What exactly did you hear?" I asked, striving for a casual tone, though my voice betrayed a faint tremor. His steady gaze met mine, unnervingly composed. It was almost worse than outright anger. "I heard you telling your friends that I'm your safe bet, that you miss the thrill you felt with your ex, among other things," he said evenly. Honestly, Elena, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The blood drained from my face as I scrambled for a way to explain, to contain the damage. But one look at his expression told me that excuses wouldn't suffice this time. "It was just some silly girl talk," I stammered, attempting a feeble smile. "You know how it is. We exaggerate sometimes to get a laugh." "Girl talk? Exaggeration?" he repeated, a bitter chuckle escaping his lips. "It wasn't just joking, Elena. You detailed to them that I'm the safe choice, your compromise. You explained that the guys who gave you excitement weren't marriage material, and that's why I was the logical option. You made it crystal clear that I'm not what you truly want." I opened my mouth to deny it, but the weight of the truth hung heavily in the air. "I was just venting," I finally admitted, though my own words sounded hollow. His voice softened slightly, but an unyielding firmness remained. "If I'm only the fallback option, Elena, I deserve to know. I can't stay in a relationship where I'm just someone's second choice." Shame washed over me, and my eyes dropped to the floor. I never imagined he'd actually hear me say those things. But now that he had, I couldn't deny the reality I'd been pushing aside. Stability was what I craved, yes, but at what cost? And what about his happiness? When I looked up, his face was resolute, his determination unwavering. "Elena, I don't think I understand what you meant," he said coolly. Frustration flared inside me. I was venting at him. That's all it was, blowing off some steam. It doesn't mean I don't love you or want to be with you. Everyone needs an outlet sometimes. But he didn't relent. "Having an outlet is one thing. But the things you said..." He paused, his voice dropping. "It's as though you see me as a compromise. The boring but safe choice. That's not exactly a solid foundation for a happy marriage." I let out an exasperated sigh. "Are you seriously going to let this ruin everything? Over something you overheard?" He stepped back slightly, steadying himself. "Maybe it is a deal breaker," he said quietly. "Because it's not just about what you said. It's the fact that you feel that way." I opened my mouth, ready to argue, but the words wouldn't come. I'd never seen him this serious, this immovable. It hit me like a punch to the gut. He might actually be questioning our relationship. His eyes held a gravity I wasn't used to. Fine. If this was the road he wanted to go down, I'd meet him there. "If you're this insecure over harmless girl talk, maybe that says more about you than it does about me," I snapped. "I'm sure your friends have said much worse things about their girlfriends." "Actually, we don't," he replied softly. "We respect the privacy of our partners." "Oh, give me a break," I shot back, my face flushing with heat. "Don't act like men don't talk. At least I was just venting to my closest friends. It's not like I put it on social media." "You don't see the problem, do you?" he asked, his voice steady. "What problem?" I countered sharply. "That you're being overly sensitive. That you're turning an innocent conversation into a full-blown crisis?" He nodded slowly, his face calm but unrelenting. "I see it clearly," he said firmly. I stepped closer, my tone softening as I tried to regain control. "Come on, baby. You know I love you. You know I chose you. Why let something this trivial get to you?" But this time, something was different. Normally, this approach would have worked. He'd soften, apologize, and we'd move past it. Tonight, though, he looked at me as though I were a stranger. "You didn't choose me, Elena. You settled for me. Those were your words." "It was just talk," I exclaimed, my voice tinged with desperation. "Why are you blowing this out of proportion? Everyone vents about their relationships. You're acting like I betrayed you when all I did was confide in my friends." My head throbbed as I spoke. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. He wasn't supposed to hear, and even if he had, he should have let it slide. Why couldn't he just move on? "You're making this into a much bigger deal than it is," I said, trying to regain control. "If you'd just calm down and think rationally..." But I could see it in his face. I was losing him, and the realization enraged me. Who did he think he was, making me feel guilty for such a normal conversation? This was absurd. He was being irrational. The room felt oppressive, the tension thick and unfamiliar. My eyes darted to the engagement ring sitting on the coffee table, a habit I'd once shrugged off as convenience. Funny how hindsight brought clarity. "Everyone talks to their friends about their relationships," I said, my tone dripping with sarcasm. "It's completely normal." "Fine," he replied evenly. "Then would it be acceptable for me to discuss intimate details about you with my friends? Should I compare you to my ex and tell them I settled for you?" My mouth fell open. That's not the same," I stammered. "Why not? How is it any different?" he pressed. "Because it just is," I shouted, panic rising in my chest. "Why are you being so unreasonable?" His laugh was quiet and devoid of humor. "You know what, Elena? You're not sorry for what you said. You're just sorry that I heard it." "Of course I'm sorry you heard it," I snapped. "I knew you'd overreact and twist this into something it's not." "Not?" he repeated, his voice sharp. "My trust, my dignity, those mean nothing to you?" The clarity in his words struck me like a slap. "If it's nothing," he continued, "then why can't you answer me? Why is it okay for you but not for me?" "It's not the same," I said, my voice rising in frustration. Women share things. We're there for each other. It's different. No, he replied firmly, cutting me off. This time there was no room for negotiation in his tone. You don't respect me, and because of that there are things we can't talk about, I say, my voice steady but loaded with significance. My words land like stones. At some point, you made up your mind that I was the safe bet, the reliable option, your fallback. That's not fair, she argues, but I lift a hand to silence her protest. Elena, listen. I reach for her engagement ring, lying on the coffee table, and place her apartment key beside it. I refuse to be anyone's backup plan. Her eyes widen as the reality of the moment sets in, her expression shifting from disbelief to panic. Adam, stop this. You can't just throw everything away because of one trivial argument. You're right, I reply. It isn't just about one argument. It's about trust and respect, the very pillars a relationship is supposed to stand on. I turn the ring over in my hand, studying it before meeting her gaze. Tell me something, Elena. If Stephen called you tomorrow and said he was ready to commit, what would you do? The silence that follows is deafening, yet it speaks volumes. I thought so, I murmur. Adam, no, she pleads, her voice softer now, almost desperate. You're just being insecure. We can fix this. I'll call the girls and they'll explain. It was nothing, just silly chatter. And that's exactly the problem. I slip the ring into my pocket. You think this is about insecurity? I shake my head slowly. It's about recognizing when to walk away from someone who doesn't value me. Her tone sharpens, laced with bitterness. So that's it? You're ending this over a bruised ego? No, Elena, I say, heading for the door without looking back. I'm leaving because you've shown me exactly how you see me, and I deserve more than to be someone's second option. Her voice rises behind me, frantic as I reach the door. You're overreacting. You're seriously walking away from 5 years over nothing? Each step away feels like shedding a weight I've carried for too long. By the time I close the door behind me, her muffled sobs barely register. A month ago, that sound might have stopped me, might have made me turn around. Tonight, it only reaffirms my decision. Some things can't be mended. As soon as the door clicks shut, I grab my phone, my hands trembling. With frantic keystrokes, I fire off a message to the group chat with Anna and Rachel. Emergency. Adam overheard. He's leaving. Call now. Moments later, the three-way call connects. My mascara is smudged, but I'm too furious to care. He's lost his mind, I say, pacing back and forth. He came home acting all self-righteous over one stupid conversation. You two have to help me fix this. What do you expect us to do? Anna asks, her voice cautious. I don't know, I snap. Call him? Explain that we were joking, that it meant nothing and everyone talks like that? My throat tightens and my voice falters. He even took the ring. Do you understand? He took it. Maybe we should apologize, Rachel suggests hesitantly. I'm not apologizing, I bark, then immediately soften my tone. Sorry, I didn't mean it like that. We didn't do anything wrong. It was harmless, right? Just normal girl talk. But even as I say it, unease coils in my chest. The look in his eyes before he walked out wasn't like any of our usual fights. This wasn't something I could charm my way out of. Oh God, I whisper, sinking onto the couch. Do you have any idea how long it took me to get him to propose? 6 months of dropping hints, 3 months of leaving bridal magazines lying around, 2 months of casually strolling past jewelry stores. All that effort, gone, over one stupid girl's night. Maybe he just needs time to cool off, Anna suggests weakly. You don't get it, I reply, tears streaking my face. I'm 33. Do you know how hard it is to find a man with a good job, who wants to settle down and isn't living with his parents? My voice rises, hysteria creeping in. Do you know what the dating pool looks like at this age? Divorced men with kids? Commitment phobes who think they're God's gift to women. At least Adam... My voice trails off as his words echo in my mind. At least he was stable, I mutter. Anna hesitates. Maybe that's the problem. If you were only with him because he's stable... Don't you dare, I cut her off sharply. You're the one who asked if I'd settled. You're the one who brought up Stephen. The call goes quiet, tension hanging heavy. I glance down at my bare hand, the absence of the ring taunting me. This is a disaster, I whisper, staring at the empty space on my finger. I'm going to end up alone in a tiny apartment with nothing but a dozen cats. Is that what you wanted, Adam? I shout into the empty room. For me to become the crazy cat lady? My phone buzzes. A message from Adam. I'll be by tomorrow to collect my things. Please have them ready. No, 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 I mutter, frantically typing out a response before deleting it. Rewriting, deleting again. Should I apologize? Blame the wine? Beg him to stay? I put the phone back to my ear. Girls, I say quickly, I need you both here tomorrow. When Adam comes, we'll convince him he's overreacting. This is all just a misunderstanding. Elena, Rachel interjects gently. Maybe we shouldn't. Fine, I snap, hanging up before she can finish. So much for supportive friends. Storming into the bathroom, I glare at my reflection. 33. The number mocks me. Adam wasn't perfect. Maybe I wanted someone more thrilling, but he was supposed to be my guarantee, my safety net, the one who'd keep me from being alone. Stupid, 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 I mutter, scrubbing streaked mascara from my cheeks. None of this was supposed to happen. He wasn't supposed to find out. He was supposed to stay in his predictable little world, grateful I'd chosen him. Now what? How do I explain this to my mother? She'd already started planning the wedding. My younger sister is getting married this summer. How can I show up single and alone? I can't. My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you.